Ready when you are.
Sand, snow, slavery and sewers, all in this 10th edition of I'll Explain Later, the Doctor Who podcast that's cocky-licking good, with me, Jim Hall.
Me, Matt Needer.
And me, John West.
My tea's gone cold, I'm wondering why I got out of bed at all.
Tonight, Barbara blows away a sinister sleeping bag while Hartnell battles a pretend paraplegic in fancy dress. We head to the barren world of Dido and attempt the rescue.
David Tennant shows Donna a pulsating organ while Lord Percy wishes he was filling himself. We join the revolt and break the circle on Planet of the Ood.
And in 1985, one event dominated television, bringing a global audience together to highlight an important issue and demand that something be done about it. Colin Baker addresses whether his famous enemies were originally from Mondas or Telos in Attack of the Cybermen.
Okay, so welcome to the show, episode 10. We're into double figures now.
Woohoo!
So obviously it's March, the season of renewal. We're going to kick off this month by looking at The Rescue, which is from 1965, the very beginning of 1965, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like January 1965.
Yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I'm not sure what the date
2nd of January and 9th of January.
Oh, well, there we go. It's a two-parter, and is, I think, perhaps most, if not only, remembered for being the first time that we see a new member of the regular cast join Doctor Who. So at the end of the previous story, Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, has elected to stay on in the year 2164 and marry David, the freedom fighter, and help rebuild Earth. So the Doctor continues his travels with Ian and Barbara and land on the planet Dido.
Dido.
That's
Dido.
D-I-D-O.
Not
Well,
D-I-S-C-O.
Let's not make the mistake. What was it? Was it like the John Nathan Turner book in the 80s, where
think it was
the plot of this story simply begins on the planet Dildo? Which,
yes.
Yeah. Anyway, such an obvious typo, yet no less funny for it. On the planet Dido, an Earth rocket has crashed, wiping out...
Well, a UK rocket. I think it's got a
rocket,
Union
yes.
flag on the...
yeah, because Ian and Barbara recognise the flag, don't they?
So the British space programme is well underway by this point.
Scotland's still with us.
Yeah. But we have a UK rocket crashed on the planet Dido. There are two survivors. One, teenage girl Vicky. Two, angry... grumpy paraplegic Bennett. And they are waiting to be rescued, but are menaced by the horrible lizard monster native of planet Dido, Coquillian.
They're in an abusive relationship with him. He rescued them, but he's pretty much keeping them from... doing anything else, isn't he?
Absolutely.
Anytime there's a rescue attempt, he's keen to keep them...
Keep them where they are.
Are we going to ruin the twist?
Well, so into this situation arrives the Doctor and friends, and there is... if you've not watched The Rescue yet, and if you are unaware of what happens in The Rescue, I suggest now that you fast forward about half an hour, because... I want to ask John this, because The Rescue was comprehensively... this is the first time I've seen The Rescue, but it was spoiled for me by, I think, probably a reference book that I read when I was sort of 12 or 13. Jim has obviously seen this before. John, did you see the twist coming?
Yes, I did see it coming. However, and this really annoyed me, I had my inkling about it.
Right.
But we should say what the twist is.
Yeah, so the twist is that Coquillian and Bennett are one and the same. So Bennett is keen to sort of maintain this control that he seems to have over Vicky, sort of pops out, puts on a weird costume and turns up as Coquillian to
what really swung it for me was the first interaction between Coquillian and Vicky, because it's so bizarre, the conversation that they have, and the motivation of Coquillian is so strange, and it dovetails with just how off and how sort of brutal Bennett is.
Yeah.
So I had an inkling, but I wasn't 100% convinced. I wondered whether it was a red herring. But by chance, just as I was first thinking, I wonder if I happened to glance at the cast list on Wikipedia, which really fucking spoilt it, because it says on it,
Kevin Spacey as Bennett and Coquillian.
who is it who plays it? Ray Barrett.
I
think actually, I mean, it is only a 2-part thing, and there's some quite interesting style elements to this and some nice little sort of vignettes, character vignettes. But essentially, it's quite a simple story, and it's just about introducing Vicky.
Well, that's the thing. Oh, sorry, go on.
But I was going to say, I think Jim really nailed the most interesting thing about it, which is the abusive relationship. Because
I was joking as well.
No. But this, I mean, you know, the way Coquillian
he's gone full
Bennett,
Fritzl on them.
Absolutely,
that's exactly what it is. Yeah,
exactly. You know, the relationship is a Fritzl style thing.
Well, the Oscars will be out by now, so if Brie Larson's running with Coquillian has won some Oscars.
It's certainly, I mean, at the very least, it's certainly an abusive relationship. And you know, there's the bit where Coquillian says, "I'm the only one who can keep you safe."
Can you do the voice?
No, I'm not going to do the voice. He says, "I'm the only one who can keep you safe," and she was, sort of trying to Barbara. She sort of defends Coquillian, even though he's pretty horrible to her.
She's quite happy to remain sort of, well, not happy, but sort of perhaps buys
accepting
the logic, accepting of his logic. I mean, this is the thing. There's a reason why
I think that I don't think there's any way other than that this is intended as well.
No, of course, I completely agree.
So let's just really nail this down. Bennett is Coquillian. He's wearing a funny outfit, but it's because he's committed a murder and he doesn't want the Earth authorities to actually come and rescue them because he's going to be.
I was thinking. So he murdered on the way to whichever planet they were trying to get to before they crashed on Dido. He murdered another crew member en route, and then in order to cover it all up, he murdered
kills everyone.
He murdered everyone else as well,
and stranded himself on a desert planet.
So, and for some reason, Vicky is sort of unaware of this going on. But
it's interesting he's kept her alive, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. So basically, we've sort of immediately gone off on the deep end with this, and perhaps gone into sort of some of the heavy subtext. But the reason why I raised all of this and wanted to ask John about the twist is because the sort of memory of this story, the kind of folk memory, if you like, or what fans remember it for, is simply as a means to an end of introducing Vicky. The twist is quite often criticised as being, it's a whodunit with a cast of one, which I absolutely don't buy that as criticism of it at all, because it's, first of all, not immediate. The twist isn't who is Coquillian, which of the crew could it be. The twist is that Bennett and Coquillian are the same, and that he is exerting this huge amount of abusive influence over Vicky. The more interesting reveal, I think, yes, okay, there's a twist, and a lot of people just watching it on one level would see, oh my god, it's, the mask would come off and go. And if, like me, you know this well in advance, perhaps, that is a little deflating. But
perhaps, but actually, I think that is far less interesting a twist than why is he doing it?
Yeah,
it's unraveling the motivation. Why is he doing that?
And that's the thing that I think, there's not much to the plot of this, and it is seen as very much a vehicle to introduce Vicky. But I think there's loads of really interesting character stuff bubbling under this in terms of the relationships between all the characters. And I have to say, having not seen this before and expecting it to be sort of broadly functional in terms of what it does for the grand narrative of Doctor Who, I really, really loved this. I thought it was simultaneously both very sweet and very emotionally literate in how it treated all of the characters and actually gave them all a degree of sort of emotional heft and dignity.
Yeah, I mean, this is a point when the show, rather than the Doctor and his companions, is very much they're an ensemble cast, really. So the Doctor's...
And it's dealing with a hole in the ensemble cast for the first time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, even though the Doctor's there... And it's a lovely moment at the beginning when the... the Doctor's in the TARDIS and goes to ask Susan to do something, and then pauses and looks a little bit forlorn.
I got a tiny bit misty-eyed at that.
Yeah,
it was lovely.
So
he
catches himself, doesn't
he? He catches himself, and Ian and Barbara just have a glance between themselves, and she said, why don't you show me how to work the doors or the scanner?
They're a bit worried about him, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they can't see his face, but Hartnell really is just so... Oh, God, it is quite moving, that bit.
Well, I think the huge takeaway across all of this, and, at the risk of sounding like a broken record with every other time that we've reviewed a Hartnell episode,
including the gunfighters.
Yes. He's outstanding in this, I think, because we get the full range, as we were sort of saying last time when we reviewed the Aztecs. You know, this idea of that he's just a bit doddery is very much a character decision. But we get the full range of what Hartnell can do in this.
Including Action Man.
Yeah, Action Man. Yeah, so he gets a
he isn't
fight
taking
scene.
any crap, is he?
No.
Yes.
He gets a fight scene, but
he starts the fight.
He's simultaneously, you know, sort of slightly vague and doddery in the TARDIS. Then he's sort of emotional and grandfatherly, and you know his relationship with Vicky is lovely in this. He immediately sees how, you know, he engages with her as a person and as a lost soul.
It's what would happen if his granddaughter was better acted.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. That's something, mental note. We'll come back to that. But you know, he's immediately, and it's not just that he sees the void that she can fill in his life after Susan's gone, but also the void he can fill in hers. But then also we get the steeliness of, and I think that scene where he confronts Bennett. Yeah, I mean, admittedly, you know, it might not be a surprise by that point, or we might be underwhelmed by it as a twist, but Hartnell is magnificent in that.
It's
and
so well put
suddenly,
because he's like in a throne, isn't he? He's found the kind of remains of that culture,
and he knows that he's there behind him. And
he's very much like Hercule Poirot at that point.
It's
and
so beautifully
obviously,
played.
I know it's you, and he just, you know, calls him Bennett, and then Bennett takes the mask off, and it's wonderful.
But there's no sort of flubbing around or any of the kind of stuff. It's like he's down to business. He's like, he knows that in this case, and so he gets to show, I think. There've been plenty of aspects of his performance that have come out through the stories that we've looked at, but he gets to show the full range of what he's capable in this, and I think he's magnificent.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, when you were talking about the full range, there's also the bits where he sort of talks to himself and chuckles and is quite playful, and I just love the turns of phrase he gets. Like, there's lovely bits of where sort of Indiana Jones style stuff, where they're on a ledge and then
the swords are coming out.
They spring a booby trap, and you know, it's really good stuff actually. But
it's sort of visually underwhelming, but the commitment that they both put into playing it, him and William Russell, are
So basically, Ian's going to get edged off a ledge by some swords, and there's this kind of beast beneath them that's going to eat them.
That's Sandy the Sand Beast,
isn't
it?
We find out in the fullness of time it's a benign creature, but he looks sinister. It's this kind of...
But I love the way he says things like, my dear Chesterton. It's like he's just got these little bits that show just little phrases, turns of phrase that sort of indicate they're actually friends and people who know each other and spend time with each other and have a reason to be together. And of course, we're going to be reviewing another serial later in this podcast, which where I feel that perhaps doesn't quite work quite so well.
Yeah,
just without preempting anything.
But sorry, just picking up on what you said about in the fullness of time, we find out that the monster is in fact the very benign Sandy the Sand Beast, who Barbara murders in cold blood.
Which is a lovely moment,
But it's full of little details that sort of wrong foot you like that. Where, I mean, the other really big one, the twist that I genuinely didn't see coming, is when the two natives of planet Dido turn up at the end, and they're humanoid.
Because we've been told they're an extinct race, but ultimately they turn
And then the
up
way the Doctor describes them, he says, and where did they have like the horns or whatever? And it was like, and he was saying, yes, that is it. So the idea that it's not only just that Bennett's putting on a crap monster costume, but actually they're ceremonial robes. And I mean, that bit at the end where the two guys turn up, I thought that really pulled the rug out from under my feet and really surprised me, because I wasn't expecting that at all. But it's full of these just like tiny little details that are very well thought through and very well just worked into the fabric of the narrative. That it's definitely not taking anything for granted, this story. It's small, it's relatively slight and contained in terms of what it's trying to do, and it's only 2 episodes long. But
it's got one purpose, which is introduce Vicky, but they put rather more effort in than they needed to. Which, all right, we reviewed Tomb of the Cybermen last time, but I think the consensus there was they maybe were doing quite a sort of stock job on it rather than putting a bit of extra effort in.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, because I watched those 2 stories. I watched Tomb of the Cybermen for last month's show and The Rescue for this in relatively close proximity, and that was one of the things that... So I know last month I got quite sort of incensed at the laziness of Tomb of the Cybermen. And I think that's because sort of setting it alongside something like this which, you know, is short. It has a functional job to do, but at the same time is just really trying to push the envelope in terms of what's going on here. Who are these people? How are they interacting? Why are they interacting?
It's not been that long since we reviewed another show where Barbara was taking a big role, which was the Aztecs. How did you find her here when, her stand-up moment was blowing away Sandy the Sound Beast?
It was
which again is a moment that doesn't need to be there, but it's there for some reason, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And actually, interestingly enough, it's sort of, I don't know whether this is intent. I suspect it is, but there is that palpable sense of Barbara feeling like she knows best, because actually Vicky is shouting at her, no, don't shoot.
Yeah, I mean that moment is we don't know what it is, but it's this sort of sand sleeping bag monster is coming up towards Vicky. Barbara shouting, and when Vicky's not paying attention, Barbara inexplicably knows the best weapon.
Yeah.
In this,
well, she found it earlier when she was setting the table for dinner, doesn't she?
And blows the shit out of it.
Yeah, and this obviously massively upsets Vicky and creates an interesting dynamic, because at that point Barbara thinks that the Doctor and Ian might have been killed, and then when they arrive, you know, dramatically you would expect it to be everyone's delighted that they're alive, but actually they arrive and the Doctor and Ian are like, hey, we're not dead, we're here. And actually, it's all very somber and very muted because Vicky's so distraught at what Barbara's done.
It gives Vicky a very good reason not to trust, certainly not to trust Barbara, but not to trust all of these, which then
gives the Doctor the opportunity
to... And that scene is wonderful, where he sends Ian and Barbara off and he wins her over. I mean, he's very paternalistic in it and probably more than a little patronising, but it's a lovely moment.
And
it's a lovely moment. It's also a good dramatic moment, because isn't that when he figures out that Bennett's got this kind of trap door in his chamber as well, I think.
Well, because also then that's when he says, I'm going to go through and see Mr. Bennett. And then that scene, I don't know whether it's just the slightly sort of odd way in which it's paced or delivered, but he knocks on the door, and obviously what we later discovered to be a tape recording of Bennett saying, go away, you can't come in here, plays. And then the Doctor proceeds to spend about 5 minutes bashing the door open with a steel girder that he's got somewhere. He's really just like, he's been turned away once, and he says, right, I'm going to...
But, actually, it comes back to the sort of the emotion, the realistic, believable, emotional relationship between the TARDIS crew. You know, we already mentioned that when he's sad about Susan, the other two, Ian and Barbara, cast a glance to each other, and Barbara intervenes and says something to make the Doctor's life a bit easier. Similarly here, he tells them to shoo away because he can deal with this one, to comfort Vicky. So it's just really believable and subtly handled, and better than it needs to be for what is just a functional two-parter.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Karen and Ford as Susan few shows back in the Aztecs. It's maybe a bit cruel to compare them, but because they're ostensibly the same kind of character, really, aren't they?
Well, they're functionally identical, I think, just with the slightly different bit.
However, I've got to say, Maureen O'Brien, I just think she's always struck me as such a sort of sparky character, you know.
I don't think I've seen any other Vicky stories.
But just going from those two, from the Aztecs and the Rescue, what's your immediate impression?
I think she's great, because I think the only differentiation between Susan is sort of really her backstory and what Maureen O'Brien's performance brings to the table. But she's instantly likeable, and I think just by dint of her situation, you know, she does convey those nuances of that kind of what is it, sort of Stockholm syndrome, isn't that the one where you start to identify with your captor?
Yes.
And actually, you know, the script doesn't go into immense detail into that kind of thing, but that sort of wavering, sort of obviously feeling devastated and bereft at her current situation, but being led to a sort of inaction to do anything about it because of the sort of emotional pressure that Bennett and Coquillian are putting on her, that does come across in the performance.
And interestingly enough, you're talking about the Stockholm Syndrome stuff, and I think it's very clear that they've decided to explore the subject of abusive, very abusive relationships within the context of a kids show. I think that's really interesting.
I'm going to have to pull back. Though. Do you think that was deliberate, or that was just a dramatic conceit? I think it's there's a murder, there's a mystery. I don't know.
No, I think it's I think it's unmistakably there that there is.
I have a lot of time for David Whittaker as a writer, but I'm not sure if we're not seeing.
No,
things that
I'm with
aren't
John.
there.
It's there in the script, because why otherwise would you give her lines where she's potentially buying what Coquillian's offering?
I want to buy into this, but I'm just I'm
I think
I'm
it's
a little
there.
cautious
I think
on it
we're
because it's a piece of 60s disposable TV.
Let's not compare and contrast too much, because we'll be here all day. But last time we encountered
we'll explain much later. Yeah.
Last time we encountered an abusive relationship in Doctor Who. Was in our first episode where we looked at the
magical
twin
days
dilemma.
of the twin dilemma.
The magical days of the twin dilemma, where it's almost like that is unambiguously what is being portrayed on screen,
but through bad writing,
or just through general ignorance around the issues. And I think the thing that sort of contrasts this to certainly the twin dilemma, but that sort of later run of the mill Doctor Who, is that's taking stuff for granted and getting bogged down in these situations entirely unintentionally. Whereas the script here, Whittaker takes so little for granted about any aspect of this. There's always, if there's a dramatic beat that he can find in something, he'll make that work. If there's a little twist where he can just slightly pull the rug on you, he'll do that.
And there are just key phrases. I mentioned this already, but
I'm sure that. Sorry, just to rather, I'm sure they're not approaching this as this is an issues drama. This is what it's about.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But I don't think this is a subtext that we're reading into it. I think it is very much there in the script, and I think it was put there by David Whittaker.
Yeah,
to dramatic end.
He's trapped her, and he's lying to her, and yet he's saying to her, he's sort of gaslighting.
It's not so much what he's saying.
It's
not so much what he's saying because he's doing it he's not doing it for sexual domination reasons. Well, we could read that into it.
Yeah, I think you could.
Dramatically, it's for just let's keep the status quo going here, that I'm not going to get taken away by the Earth.
Yeah, it's in his own interest to keep that in the
situation. It's more Vicky's response of, this guy's okay, actually, because no matter what looks bad about him, he's actually saved us, and so let's go on.
Yeah, exactly. With it, And I think that's much the most interesting. But I keep going back to that bit where I find it quite a bit chilling when he said, "I'm the only one who can keep you safe." It's just that's pretty out there. And if we compare it to, last month we discussed the Tomb of the Cybermen, which was both frankly racist and its gender politics was at best clumsy, and at worst it was pretty damn sexist. This 2 years earlier feels a really much more progressive, interesting, dramatic.
I agree with you there. I think it's just something Matt raised on the last show. But the weird thing with the Hartnell thing is it seems much more progressive and innovative than a few years later when things get a little bit more staid.
There is a female producer.
Admittedly, it's week-on-week TV, and if you're going to find something that works and you're going to make a dramatic TV show, who can blame them? But
yes, once you found a comfort zone, and the show hasn't found a comfort zone here, it's still trying something different.
And Verity Lambert is the producer.
Yeah, but arguably
that's surely had its,
that's Doctor Who's remit, is to keep doing different things all the time, which is why, as much as I love the RTD era, I think the first series of RTD was all over that went different places every week, and then very quickly settled down into, this worked last time, so we'll do it again. Yeah. And this is a constant problem Doctor Who has over 50 plus years.
One thing I did want to mention was the soundtrack, the music, and you already mentioned the glorious sort of Poirot-esque final scene in the chamber. The
music for that bit,
the ambient noise,
and it's just a sort of droning wash or something that they put over it. It's
absolutely
beautiful.
Astonishing.
Yeah,
Hartnell invents Eno at that point, does he?
It kind of is. Some guy called Tristram
Carey. He's excellent.
I don't know any of his work. But
so Tristram Carey doesn't just figure. He's
an early hero in the
just in the pantheon of electronic music. He did a lot of early stuff, but he's in that great hallmark of avant-garde British electronic composers. It's a bit like actually.
It really stood out
when we talked about Richard Rodney Bennett doing the Aztecs. They were getting seriously good people to come in and do work here, and whose work, it's not just like sort of, a lot of the Radiophonics Workshop guys are sort of fairly well celebrated within Doctor Who terms, but didn't really have much impact outside. You know, these people, Tristram Carey, Richard Rodney Bennett, you know, these are all really good people who are doing great work elsewhere. But also, I mean, it's interesting you picked up on the music. I think a lot of the realisation of this, I think, is really good as well. I think that, I mean, yeah, we said that the monster is perhaps a little crap, and the sort of the sequence of the knives and the ledge and stuff is
not brilliantly realised.
It's not brilliantly realised, but, you know,
it's representative.
It's representative. But I would say that the opening model shot of the ship looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And again, the interiors, I like, I mean, sort of, it's a bit like the sort of 60s Batman series, that I like the fact that because it's crashed at an awkward angle, everything's on the tilt, so that if only just that, you know, they've moved the camera onto the side or something. But it's not just like, oh, well, it's the set for the ship. It's that, you know, they're really thinking about creating a world. And, you know, I buy into Planet Dido as much as I see it represented on the screen.
Just one final thing I wanted to touch on, and I think this is a sort of debate, and I don't want to go too much into the sort of fan fiction erotica thing, but
not again.
I'm pretty clear from this that Ian and Barbara have a romantic relationship. Am I reading too much into it?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, going from what we were earlier talking about with whether the, you know, abusive relationship stuff is there or not, or whether Whittaker, you know what I'm saying there. No, that's not an unusual thing to.
But I wonder whether that's actually more in the performance than in the script.
Well, the chemistry's there.
It's more for me that they're not. It's not that thing of the Doctor and he happens to have a few people with him. It's like all of them seem to be very much equals in terms of how much.
And they all have a
dramatic
reason
time
for
they're
being
having.
there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, if only that reason is like they all really like each other and like hanging out together. And that's the thing. It's like in creating a role for Vicky here that sort of obviously fulfills a need that certainly the Doctor has, and fulfills a need that Vicky has. There's not just a sort of, you know, I'll come along because it's the dramatic conceit is that I travel around with a person or people.
Your dad's been killed by the Daleks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we'll just sort of, just drag you along. That it's that these people, sort of like we were saying last month as well with the Doctor and Jamie, it's like that it's not that often that you get a sense that these are people who just enjoy each other's company, and there's a reason for them to be travelling around as a unit.
One last faintly technical question. I was watching this off a VHS. You guys presumably offer DVD?
Yes, off the DVD.
Did yours have the coda with the TARDIS landing somewhere?
Yes.
Right, because the
cliffhanger
VHS just cuts off quite suddenly, and I thought, I'm sure it lands, and it which leads into the Romans, which is the next story.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's a bit of a pointless question. That's great, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I really want to know what happens next.
Oh, I love that kind of setting up the next adventure at the end of it. I mean, it's good, and sometimes it's a bit shoehorned, and sometimes it isn't. But you know, that idea, even down to I can't remember what the episode titles of this, because neither of them are called The Rescue.
Desperate Measures and Desperate
Strangers
Measures
in
is
Space or something, or is that a different
something
one?
of that? Yeah.
Yeah. So, like the title "The Rescue," I don't think ever appears on screen. You know, that idea of just like it's a weekly instalment of an ongoing story. I really love.
I took him over to St John's Wood. He lived in Sussex or somewhere. I don't know, one of the counties, southern counties. And for some reason he couldn't get back that night, or filming or something or other. So I said, well, come with me, I'll take you over to St John's Wood where I lived, Maida Vale, St John's Wood, and found him a hotel, and I took him to my local pub and everything, and everybody was, knocked out to see Doctor Who, drinking a pint in their local, you know.
So, curiously enough, we're moving on to 2008 and Planet of the Ood from the new Series 4. I say funnily enough because this is the second podcast in a row that we're reviewing a Graham Harper directed episode.
Oh, did he direct this as well?
He did, yeah, and he did Waters of Mars, which we did last month. So, quite the double header. Again, I think he does quite a good job here. The Ood, of course, we first met in Series 2, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Impossible Planet, Satan Pit doubleheader. A sort of servant creature. It's fleshed out in this story that it's actually a servant race. or at least that's how it's portrayed. And
Well,
this is
slave as well.
well,
isn't it?
they're
Well,
essentially slaves. Yes,
We
of course.
knew they were servants, but
They're originally
Yes.
vaguely portrayed as they thrive on serving people.
Yes.
But we find out here that the company have been,
selling them.
sort of mutilating them and then selling them.
mutilating them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mutilating them and you know, it's slavery. And what I like about the episode is that it isn't one of those where we're looking for some subtext or
No.
you know, it's about that.
Yes.
And actually, you know, even the lines, because obviously Donna, Catherine Tate, is the companion for Tennant's Doctor in this. And, you know, some of the lines she's given are literally just, this is slavery and stuff like that.
So, I mean, the basic setup, it's a very simple plot, really, but you've got the Doctor and Donna land on Oodsphere, which is the titular planet of the Ood, where it's colonised by, what do they call OO, like the Ood?
Yeah.
Ood organisation or something?
Whatever, yeah. But
Something like that.
they're the terrible company
They're the company basically colonised the planet and
they've colonised
are
and
farming and lobotomising the Ood to sell as slaves globally, upon which
and
they've
selling them
forged
off.
a successful business.
But they've got a problem because random Ood are developing this thing called Red Eye when they go berserk.
What it is really is it's a slave rebellion on the planet of the Ood, really, which is
I am
is the story.
Spartacus.
Exactly, but I am Ood Sigma. But am I right? Because I've not watched Satan Pit and the Impossible Planet since they went out. But my memory of that was that the sort of what they play on there is very much they're not kind of the villains really, and they're kind of bystanders to what the actual story
They're fodder.
is
Yeah,
there. They're fodder.
Yeah.
But the idea is they look scary, but actually they're sort of friendly and subservient. And it's not so much played for laughs, but it's not played for much subtext in those episodes, is it?
I think it's played, again, I've not seen it for a long time, but in that original appearance, they're originally played as this lovely, benign character, but then when their eyes glow red, they suddenly become increasingly sinister, and they are instruments of whatever's behind the Satan Pit, you know.
Yeah.
A big issue, it wasn't just for me, I think it was for an awful lot of people, was how is the Doctor just like casually accepting that these guys are subservient and everything?
In the Satan Pit.
Also, there's the tried and tested, this cost us quite a lot to make the masks, so can we use them again?
Yeah.
So I'm very glad that they did this story a few years later.
and they directly address
and the
precisely
Doctor saying,
that.
I was a little too occupied dealing with the devil to stop and think about, could a race evolve that really just thrives on, you know, being subservient?
I mean, one of the things that I'm by no means alone in this, but I think a sort of consistent frustration of New Doctor Who is where it fails to sort of add to the canon, really. That quite often the big reveals in the series, or the big sort of iconic monsters, or the people and characters that recur, tend to be things that have come from the classic series. And you sort of can't blame them with the Daleks, because they're still a bloody good idea and look amazing. And, you know, the Master... You know, at least the Master and the Cybermen carry that kind of cultural baggage.
Let's not forget the Ice Warriors as well.
I know, and the Ice Warriors as well, and I suppose the Sontarans. Mm-hmm. But the so the only two real sort of recurring monsters that the new series have created are the Weeping Angels, who are amazing for a story, but not repeatable.
They're a visual concept that works if you don't look at them too closely.
Well, they're a concept that works for one story, but the Ood, you know, I think in some ways, I think I wouldn't want to see the series get Ood fatigue, but it's a pleasant sentence to be able to say, but I really like the Ood, and I think they're repeatable. I think they're obviously a brilliant design.
Yeah, the design.
They're a fantastic design, and they're a fantastic concept. And they're that sort of rarity of an alien race that, without sort of breaking them down to individuals, do have a certain flavour and character about them. So there's something about, I mean, the look of them is obviously amazing, and they're beautifully built masks and props, but
it's not just a good design, it's really well executed.
The voice as well. Though.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing.
It kind of goes back to when we were saying with the Leisure Hive, the urbane voices, coupled with this design, which is like, what the hell is that?
Sort of freakish design.
What's in the pre-titles when the red eye
there's
kills the
executive who's
and what does he say? Have a nice day, or something.
Something like that.
Something as he's killing him, and it's just with as you say, the very urbane voice, and it's just pow, you're right in there.
Yeah.
But they're great.
And it's that actor they always use for fat, sweaty executives as well.
It's Sophie's dad from Peep Show. Yeah,
yes, that's right.
Well, the casting in this is very good as well because you know, Tim McInerney plays Mr. Halpern, isn't it? Who is obviously the boss of the corporation,
face of the company.
Well, the face and the
he's very
exec.
good in it.
And that's the thing. I think it's that he's you know, the character is stock evil capitalist who only cares about money and is happy to tread on anyone and anything. But he delivers it with such relish that, and also then the journey
and
that character
and frustration
goes.
as well. Obviously, he's trying to get out to be. He's going to try and keep his job and everything can be successful. But he's also got an air of, oh, Jesus, this is such a stressful job. There's that whole subtext with what we think is going to be hair tonic and stuff, rather than just, I'm going to ignore this and become, you know, top of the job. You know? It's almost like, oh, God, I've got to put a brave face on it all.
And
this.
it's only
He's a frustrated executive, isn't
and it's only a couple of lines, but there's also, again, it's a very RTD style thing. I mean, this is actually what is it?
Heath Temple.
You know, there's... I don't mean to do down Mr. Temple's efforts here, but one senses the Russell T Davies polish on
a lot of his.
Or we know for a fact that all of these episodes got that. Yeah.
But what I'm with the Tim McInerney character, there's just a couple of lines about it having been a family business and his grandfather came up with the plan 200 years ago. You get a sense that pressure isn't just the pressure of running a business, but maybe the weight of running the family business. And
just lovely stuff about, my dad bought me here when I was 6 years old and the stink stuck with me.
I mean, just as an example of the writing again, before we go back to other things, one of the things I really liked about the writing was the way certain humour and stuff that people would say, if you can imagine a situation where you're on an alien slave planet, but stuff that people would say in that situation is what they've decided to put in the mouths of the characters. So with the translator thing, Donna doesn't really understand it. She says, "What is it with that Persil ball?"
Yeah,
and you know, when they first come across the Ood in the snow that's been shot and then dies, she says, "What is it?" And the Doctor immediately says, "It's a he, not an it." And I think, you know, the idea of the whole depersonalization of the other, whether it's, I suppose, you know, obviously this is about slavery, but whether it's about immigrants, people overseas, you know, that's part of that discourse. It's very interesting.
It's about confronting your own prejudice as well as not just like, oh, it's unambiguous that these evil people are doing horrible things to this poor innocent race.
Exactly.
Well, should we address all this? Because I mean, what do I think of this? I'm not hugely impressed with this, and if I go through individual parts of it, I can't really see what
an episode
I don't.
as a whole.
For some reason, if I go through the individual bits, all of it works, but it somehow doesn't add up to it. And I'll get my big point about this, which is the line which I think you've already alluded to, which is when the Doctor and Donna open up like a cargo crate and find there are about 100 Ood in there. And Donna seems surprised that rather than this being like domestic help, which is being rented out or something, it's like, oh my God, they're slaves. You know?
Yeah.
And the Doctor said, who makes your clothes? And Donna comes back with, you know, is this why you travel with Earth people to make, you know, cheap shots and maybe have some moral superiority over them?
Yeah.
And the Doctor apologises, which at the time I thought was fucking appalling. That's not what the job of Doctor Who as a show is. Obviously, it's meant to be an entertainment and it's meant to be an exciting adventure. But I just think this is bizarre that point is raised and then the Doctor actively apologises for suggesting that, you know, maybe you should think about what you're doing on your planet. Yeah. Because, like I say, Doctor Who's a fantasy adventure, first and foremost, absolutely. But it's also meant to be saying to... I think it does have a remit to say to the audience, all right, you're not in a world of whatever this is, but there's something similar happening in your world. And you should be at least thinking about, should you go to, let's say, Primark or Apple stores or whatever it is, you know. And the fact that the Doctor actively apologises is a weird decision to make. If you're going to do that, why bring it up in the first place?
I think I read it slightly differently because I think I sort of get the impression he's apologising for his tone rather than having brought it up. But I kind of see where you're coming from there. I think I really like this episode. I think it's superb. And I really like the blend of stuff in it, as I say, you know. even like when they find, for example, again, I'll go back to the scene where they find the Ood that's been shot in the snow. It's dying, and it's quite a difficult scene, and yet still there's even a little bit of humour where Donna's not quite sure what to do, so she tries to speak into the translator ball, and David Tennant just says no. And actually, that's kind of, for a moment, like for half a second, that's actually quite a humorous gag, but then actually they realise the gravity of the situation. The blend of the humour with the serious subject matter is, I think, particularly well, I mean, it's a hallmark of the Russell T Davies era, but it's particularly well handled. But then there's the action sequence as well. There's the stuff with the claw grabbing for the Doctor.
But also the humour, I think, in this sort of works not just in terms of just delivering gags and lines, but there's something sort of blackly comic about, the entirety of the situation, I would say, but particularly the ending, where I know a lot of people, a lot of the more sort of, I need this to make sense of sci-fi area of the fans are sort of saying, well, that would make no sense that Mr. Halpern would turn into an Ood. Whereas I sort of think in that sort of, it's simultaneously literally about a slave rebellion, but also kind of allegorically and sort of on a fairy tale level about it as well. It sort of exists across all three registers.
Yeah,
I think
it's more important it makes sense dramatically than...
That's the thing. It doesn't make a lick of sense narratively that he would turn into an Ood, or that simply that would be something that the Ood were doing. But it's a delicious ending to that story and that sort of the slave uprising in terms of how they put him down in the crew, and then that bit where the Ood says, we will take care of him afterwards.
Because again that's followed with Donna saying, I don't know if this is right or wrong, and the Doctor says it's better that way. He does then follow it up with, if you do have a black and white view, then you'll be like,
you end up like him.
But it's also a little bit hand wavy, as people say.
Well, it's kind of, he's trying to have it always, really. But then I sort of think, if you see where this comes in the sort of tract of new series Doctor Who, and I think we talked about this with The Waters of Mars last month, that sort of as Russell T Davies nears towards the end of his run on Doctor Who, he is starting to sort of dismantle a lot of the optimism that he sets up in Series 1. And so there's that idea, in the early sort of stages of the Earth Empire, the human empire that developed in the Eccleston series, it's very much, well, isn't this a wonderful thing? Whereas here it's like they look at it and they're sort of saying Earth is full and it's spreading elsewhere, and Donna says, well, isn't humanity a bit like a virus? And then she kind of refers back to, like, we hear on the news that, we're going to be killed by global warming and that business with the bees or whatever, but, here we are. Which is, I think, very deliberately echoing the stuff that the Doctor says in It's at the End of the World, where he's like, you're always worried that you're going to be ended by global warming or toast, but can you imagine for 1 minute that you might just survive? Here, Donna is parroting that back to him, but with a lot less conviction and with a lot less sense that it's necessarily a great thing. And I think with that, then the Doctor sort of actually suggesting that the clear moral lines that he's drawn earlier on might not apply. He's confronting his own flaws. Donna's initial reaction to the situation is sort of brilliantly authentic, in that when she first hears the Song of the Ood, you imagine if Rose first heard the Song of the Ood and she'd be going, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
Like singing, innit?
But it's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. Whereas Donna can't handle it and says, make it go away, make it stop. It's almost like she acknowledges her limitations of being able to look at the truth of a situation and say, I can't handle this, I can't deal with it. And it's sort of, we're not quite there in terms of the full dismantling of RTD optimism that we get by the time we get to, Turn Left and the Waters of Mars. But it's well on the way in terms of saying, actually, we've moved on a stage now. A
character I want to talk about, and I feel terrible because I've actually forgotten the character's name. The Solana. I think she's great. I think she's a very classic RTD character in that. I was going to say, any of us should look at ourselves. That could be us doing that sort of, not necessarily that job, but a job where, okay, I don't want this job, but it's going to get me somewhere. I'm going to turn a blind eye to the moral implications of it. And there's just the beautiful moment when things are clearly going to shit, and she hangs out with the Doctor and Donna and is like panicking. I've got a note
about this
and getting it going.
Scene.
And then you can see her thinking, do I do the right thing now, or do I just, normal service is resumed? Do I do that? And she does the latter.
Well, she sort of does both. She tells them where they need to go and then immediately shouts to the guards that,
She has a choice there. And again, not to be... because I think I did this on the last show, that compared to Moffat, where that moment doesn't happen, you don't get those characters who are like, this could be any of you people watching it, and what are you going to choose?
I completely agree, and that scene is pivotal because that is more than anybody else in it. That person is you. And all the sort of covering.
She sees the reality of it. She sees where it's all going. Wrestles with whether or not to make the right decision, and then doesn't.
And then there's a little pause before she makes the wrong decision.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
That meeting, the initial sales meeting that the Doctor and Donna managed to infiltrate, where Solana's doing all this spiel about how the Ood are a reflection of us. And we make sure that they are healthy, safe, and educated. It's all about. There's a lot of sort of moralizing imperialism sort of stuff going on there, and
it's like
civilizing
why
savages.
the colonies should be grateful for what the British Empire did for them. We gave them Christianity, for God's sake. They were
we should mention the actress is Aisha Darker.
Yeah.
And I thought it's not only well written, but she did a grand job with it.
Yeah, it's terrific.
She does just the right level of shtick for it.
Yeah, and you can see,
you can tell she doesn't believe it, but she's
but that's her job.
Perfectly done. Yeah,
and
exactly.
you can see why she's been employed in that role. The all the stuff about
there's a blank enthusiasm about her.
Yeah, there is, and it's like it's don't worry, this is a fire drill, and the ease with which anyone who's ever been to a sales meeting, I mean that wonderful bit where the sort of city boys are in but it's a free bar, who I don't know who that guy is as well. But
he's good.
He was really good because that is exactly a city boy prick, and it's so glorious when he gets his from the Ood. It's just fantastic. Yes, go on, my son.
He got a bully ramming from the Ood.
The other line that I really wanted to raise was because we were talking about what's his name, the McInerney character,
Halpin.
Mr. Halpin.
Yeah, so we were talking about Mr. Halpin being a relatively straightforward thing, but with this thing about his childhood, there is of course that key bit where he says to Ood Sigma, "What you've always been very loyal. Go be with your people."
Yeah, he has a little
while you can
almost redemption.
It's not quite redemptive because he then also goes and murders the Doctor guy. But it's
although is he sending Sigma off to die? I don't know.
Sort of, but it's more than that, isn't it? And what I hesitate because of the what is it called, the Godwin thing.
Oh yeah,
but
Godwin's law.
Yeah, but it did make me think of sort of stories of high up Nazi officers who had quote unquote their good due, who they would help to avoid the Holocaust basically or whatever. It tapped into all sorts of stuff. I think it's brilliant, and I think Graham Harper directed it a clip. And
I mean, like I said, I can't really put my finger on it, but if I go through the individual bits, I like it, but together it just doesn't quite work for me. I get the feeling this would have been...
What it doesn't land, I think, is... sort of just thinking about what you're saying, it doesn't land on a clear point about saying, and this is what we are meant to understand about our current situation.
Well, I think it raises the points, but doesn't quite go far enough with them. And I think there's not enough time to do it, I think it raises these issues and just kind of then moves on to the next thing.
But I think then, I mean, even sort of stripping away the allegorical aspects, which you can't because that's what it is. But, on its own dramatic terms, I think... I mean, the thing that I'd forgotten about it, because I'd not seen it since it went out. And I remember liking it at the time, and I remember sort of thinking sort of fondly of it. But it's unambiguous and far more unambiguous and far more powerful in showing how the Ood are brutalised than I remember it being. And it's horrible. I mean, it's like... there's the sequences obviously just showing them as subservient is one thing, and then when they actually, because we were saying one of the things we quite like about it is the urbane voice, so then that dignity stripped away in the demo scene where they say we're bringing in a range of voice options for them, and they have one do a sexy voice and then one do a Homer Simpson voice, which is a black joke but horrible as well. It's funny but horrible. And then the scene where basically they
the face that Catherine Tate pulls at that point as well. As Donna, she's just disgusted by that whole sales meeting.
But I'd forgotten actually about the scene where they find them sort of holding the hind brain in their hands, and you just realise the extent to how the fact that as a race, they've been, raped and mutilated. It's like, and it's not that this is implied. It's shown and made completely explicit. And I think it's very powerful.
Do you think the impetus for this story was the Satan pit? And why didn't the Doctor realise this was a slave race? Or do you think it was we had the costumes?
It could well have been a jumping off point.
Popular.
But I think the Ood certainly were popular first time around.
Yeah. And they are an extraordinary design, aren't they? Because they can look sinister at a turn on a sixpence, and they can look really benign and cuddly as well.
I think it was what you said when we talked last year about Daleks in Manhattan, that they do sort of subscribe to that thing of a modern Doctor Who alien race being a good prosthetic mask in a boiler suit, which it is. But I mean, it's executed so perfectly here. Just I think in terms of look and concept.
I mean, even the facial expressions, because they're deliberately quite enigmatic so that they can be both cute and sinister depending on the
there's something about those eyes at an angle blinking which and the way they do all sorts of things, but they've really done a lot with it. Like they can frown and the eyes can narrow, and just that it's a bloody good prosthetic. So, John, what I need to ask you is, this is our first Donna story, isn't it? We did Midnight, but she's only in there very briefly.
Barely,
You're a big fan, aren't you?
I am, and I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I already said about she spends the initial sales meeting, she just in the background, Donna, just pulling faces, because obviously she's been brought up sharp by the death of the Ood in the snow. She suddenly thinks, no, this isn't a weird alien squid-looking thing. These are people, and I get that now. And she immediately goes straight into that sales meeting and is fucking appalled by what she sees. She doesn't hide it. The scene where they find the sort of pre-mutilation Ood, and Donna, the Doctor invites Donna to hear the song,
voice,
the telepathic song of captivity. And he plugs her in sort of psychically, and God, I mean, just when she starts crying and saying "make it stop," it's
amazing.
Scene. Bloody hell! I mean, I was I had a bit of a catch in my throat, because she really delivers that. But they're so good together as well.
That's the thing, and I think it's like, as we've said about a few of the other crews, but crucially not enough of them, is that with the 10th Doctor and Donna, you do get a sense of the genuine friendship that David Tennant and Catherine Tate have, and this is continued, because you see them pop up on all sorts of things together, like subsequent to that. And
they've done stage work.
And the fact that they have now reunited for Big Finish as well, as Big Finish's first sort of foray into the new series, presumably because that was getting to work with each other again was something that they obviously wanted to do. But how that comes across in terms of, well, why are the Doctor and Donna travelling together? Because they just bloody love hanging out with each other, which kind of takes you right back to the Fourth Doctor and Sarah and the Second Doctor and Joey.
I mean, we've still got that gag of when the PR girl says, Dr. Noble and Miss Noble. No, we're not. We're
so not married.
I love their screwball stuff.
Okay.
I
found it quite trying, but no, they clearly like each other's company.
She can do no wrong in this season for me.
But it's also what she's known for, is that she can handle comedy incredibly well. She's an incredibly talented comic actress. And, actually what the surprise most people had from this season was that she could handle the drama as well as handling the comedy. Which
shouldn't have been a surprise to anyone who knew about her RSC background,
or who frankly saw, I had problems with the degree to which I thought her sketch show was funny, but she's amazing at playing lots of different characters.
That sounds so clinical. You've kind of answered the question there.
Yeah, no, I didn't like her sketch show. The degree
to which I found it.
I thought that she does, when she plays an old woman or a teenage girl, she fully occupies being an old woman or a teenage girl. She's a really good actress.
Yeah.
On the last show, we were talking about Waters of Mars, and there was some question about whether the Ood turning up at the end were a good portent for things to come. What kind of role do you think they occupy here?
Yes, they kind of transition,
because they go from a
being
slave race to just
they're
now going to be
spirit guide, and actually, in part that's going to be the Doctor. It's not the Doctor reaping what he sows, because he sets them free, but the fact is, the Ood across the universe are supposedly meant to be telepathically linked, but because they've got this force around the big Ood shared brain, they can't communicate. And there's something I really like about the idea that, as soon as the Doctor releases them from telepathic captivity, and that they are allowed to communicate with each other, that they sort of exist as this sort of, he has this sort of psychic, I mean, it's never explicitly spelled out, but, their return appearances are there.
I'll explain later.
But they're there as the sort of portents of doom, really, or key emotional moments for him.
Well,
and
the thing is,
I think that's such a wonderful idea.
Well, basically, he was part of the process of setting them free, and in return, they have committed to be there for him because they know that trying times are coming.
Well, not just him, Dr. Donna.
Yeah, exactly.
I kind of like the idea that their view of things is a little bit more...
well, they view them, which obviously does forecast what happens at the end of the series with the creation of the Dr. Donna.
Yes,
and then a literal composite at the end of the series.
Yeah.
But no, that idea that they sort of then exist as the 10th Doctor's sort of spirit guide or something is wonderful.
Of a Ouija board of,
It's wonderful because, again, it's sort of one of those things that within the context of the narrative, you totally buy into it. But then when you take a step back and have a look at it and look at the reality of the design, it's fucking mental. But it works so beautifully that you don't question it. And then, to me, that's just one of those things that exists at the very heart of Doctor Who. It's totally mental, but it's such a beautiful idea. You buy into it.
I haven't seen the finished sequence yet, so I hope they don't stitch me up. They could make the claw look decidedly unthreatening, in which case I'm running for my life away from some fairground grabber.
Welcome to 80s Doctor Who at its most continuity heavy. Colin Baker is the 6th Doctor. He winds up on Earth trying to track down some alien technology and runs into his old enemy, Commander Lytton, who's a sort of mercenary. Lytton's looking for the Cybermen under the streets of London. Not cue for a Ralph McTell song, I don't think. And by the end of the first...
let's just get this over with.
By the end of the first episode, and something to point out, this is the one-off season where the episodes are 45 minutes long. And 2 parts.
Double lengths.
Yeah, the TARDIS is hijacked and taken off to Telos. So the Cybermen can kind of get control of time travel and hopefully go back and prevent the destruction of their homeworld, Mondas, which is a reference back to a story from 20 years earlier. And we meet the Cryons, who are played by Faith Brown and Sarah Greene from Blue Peter.
Yep.
Can I just stop and say...
I'm just doing the plot there.
That is a heroic piecing together of the plot.
Yeah.
Because, frankly, it's very difficult to... If you're hoping to use Attack of the Cybermen as the chief source for the plot of Attack of the Cybermen, you're gonna have trouble.
To other texts.
Yeah, you have to piece it together from other...
Right, it seems like a simple thing of just, there's some Cybermen up to some no good, there's some sewers and a quarry, but
none of it's...
there's something going on there that's like... This happened and this, and I have really tried to boil it down there.
This is our first encounter with the 6th Doctor since
the
Twin Dilemma on our very first show last year.
We're into dark times. It's kind of anti-nostalgia. I was 13 when this came out, and this whole season is very much me thinking I've loved Doctor Who for the majority of my life, which is like 5 years at that point.
Maybe it's time to move on.
And I'm watching it and absolutely recognising that it's fucking awful.
Jesus. So this is bringing back some bad memories for you.
There's always anti-nostalgia with it, yeah. Gentlemen.
But hang on, no. Were you able to do some revisionism on that? And did you find something?
I was going to say, how many times have you watched? Because obviously, Twin Dilemma you brought to the table as something that you watch on a fairly regular basis, just because you find it so
going back
bad.
to that, there's a couple of mates who I always sort of have a few drinks and watch the Colin Baker stuff with. But I always find it quite a depressing thing to watch this season of Doctor Who, particularly.
Because this is very much, if there's a sense that the twin dilemma represents a bit of a false start for the 6th Doctor for all sorts of reasons. It's like it's tacked on at the end of the Peter Davison era, and it's shit. This is sort of where the era begins in earnest. It's the new season. It's a new format. This is where we're kind of hitting the ground running. It's fair to say that it doesn't do a better job of introducing the 6th Doctor than the Twin Dilemma did.
It's disastrous.
Well, there's less strangling of companions.
I suppose that's the one thing I would say. So can we just... We are all sort of assuming that we all agree that this is terrible, right?
Yes.
And it is terrible. What I would say is that I'd not seen this before I watched it for this, so I was coming to this completely fresh. and I expected to loathe it on pretty much every level. And I think the best I can say about it is that it wasn't quite as appallingly apocalyptically bad as I was expecting. Now, it's still lousy. It still doesn't work pretty much on any level. There are very few aspects of it that I can find to praise. But I did think, especially coming off the back of the Twin Dilemma, I was expecting to come into this and think that this is just apocalyptically bad. But what I think differs it from the Twin Dilemma is I think the Twin Dilemma just accidentally takes itself down all sorts of ill-advised routes. I think all of the problems in this are entirely intentional. And possibly that makes it less entertaining, because the Twin Dilemma sort of ends up shit partly by design and partly by accident, whereas this ends up shit, but it's shit sold with conviction, I think.
It reaches
now,
the
that's
goals
not
it wanted
that's
to reach,
not me
but
trying to give a revisionist reading on it, so please don't take it as that way. But this is very much the result of everyone's decisions to do this, as opposed to...
Before I ask John what he thinks, can I just ask you to clarify, why did you come to this with low expectations? Was it this story or just the Twin Dilemma?
The reputation of this story, my feelings about what I've seen of the era as a whole, its reputation for continuity porn, which I always have an issue with, and expectations set by the Twin Dilemma.
This is really terrible.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's. I know what you're. I know what you're saying. I mean, it's a terrible.
I don't want you to think for any minute that I'm praising this or that I think there's anything good about this. I hear what you're saying. All.
This is a level of terrible that they can at least fully own. This is at least what they intended to do.
That's literally it. That's all I'm saying.
In their mind's eye, this is what was intended, and that it got to screen.
Yes.
Insofar as but. And I know you're not saying any more than that.
It's not even actually me saying that makes it any better, but it's a technical difference as to why it's bad to the Twin Dilemma.
It's not accidentally hit the screen in a certain way. I don't really know where to start. None of this works. I mean, just to begin with, as you said, as an opener to the season, they've done nothing to... And we've discussed before, it's a bad idea, but you can sort of see that it was an idea to do something different with the Doctor, a post-regenerative crisis, a crankier...
less immediately likeable.
Less immediately likeable,
would be the best way.
Who then becomes more likeable, develops into somebody a bit different. But we discussed before that that might be an interesting idea, but it's a fatal idea to take a program and make its lead so fundamentally dislikable. And when you get to the point where at the opening of the first episode, the Doctor is left saying to Perry, "I won't hurt you, I promise." Something has gone very badly wrong.
He does give her a cute touch on the nose.
Yeah, he says, "I won't hurt you, I promise," and then touches her nose in a really creepy way. He comes across as manic. He has a personality disorder.
A little bit Fritzl.
Yeah, and ugly as a personality. Now, I do actually get that that's slightly intended, but it
doesn't make it good.
It's still clumsily done, and also, why would I want to watch that? I want to see my hero doing stuff. I don't mind seeing my hero troubled or in pain.
It's not even like last month when we talked about The Waters of Mars, where he goes off the rails and becomes a shit, essentially.
Yeah.
Which is the entire point of it.
Which is what happens in The Waters of Mars. That's the story.
You get license to do that if you really are a top draw writer.
Yeah.
And you've fleshed out the character, and there's light and shade.
And so, of course, this written by credited to Paula Moore.
Paula Moore, who was Eric Saward's girlfriend. The weird thing is, for a long time, this was assumed to be written by Eric Saward and superfan Ian Levine, who was like a technical advisor on the show at the time.
Which probably comes through in the sort of hyper...
all the continuity
stuff.
But the weird thing is, both of them are claiming credit for it now, rather than trying to shift blame to the other one.
That's the amazing thing about, because I got halfway through the documentary on this. I mean, I didn't watch the whole thing, but they are, and the documentary, I remember when we were talking about Kinder, and I talked about my wife's response to the documentary features on 80s Doctor Who, which is bitter old men still settling scores. And that's very much what the Attack of the Cybermen documentary is too. But simultaneously, obviously, the relationship between Saward and Levine was never a harmonious one anyway. But it's the two of them both trying to claim credit for it, but blaming the other for why it doesn't work. And then in terms of, but as critics, in terms of sifting through what's going on here, you know, whose responsibility is it, who brings what to the table, it's a perfect storm of shit, really, in terms of the you know, Saward and Levine as this sort of hydra who bring the very worst of what they both have to offer to the table. So in the case of Levine...
Saward's bringing the bad dialogue. Ian Levine's bringing just continuity that 99.9% of the audience aren't going to...
It's just irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's just there for the sake of being there. And that's not just in the, you know, the fact that this is simultaneously a sequel to both The 10th Planet and Tomb of the Cybermen, but it's business like the Doctor finally fixes the chameleon circuit for the first time since An Unearthly Child. He rattles through pretty much all the companion names when he's trying to remember Perry's name. Pointlessly turns up at Foreman's junkyard on Totter's Lane and says this looks familiar. You know, not that contributes anything to the story either. So there's just
and right down to the fact that they even got the same actor playing the cyber controller.
Michael Kilgarrett,
Which would normally be a nice touch, but here you go, ugh.
He's put on a little
because
bit
he's
of...
vast.
Put on
he's
some
like,
timber.
He's so fat. Yeah. And he waddles around the controller, Michael Kilgarrett.
Yeah.
He waddles around brilliantly, because just like, to be honest, I think that's quite sweet that it's like it's the same cyber controller. You know, I was looking for anything to be same as this.
It is really sweet, but sort of on top of all the other things you've mentioned, it just feels like again another drop of
it was watching this
sperm.
I had a sort of moment of revelation watching this, because I think obviously we've talked about Eric Saward, the script editor, through whom, you know, you feel his fingerprints all over a lot of what goes wrong with 80s Doctor Who. For me, it really locked into place here what he's doing wrong. And it's not just what he's incompetent at, which is dialogue, character, you know, all of these sort of little basics, you name it. But he also, and what really comes through very powerfully with this, is the shame that he feels that he is making Doctor Who. Now, Doctor Who is at its best deeply parasitical in that, you know, we see that in the Hartnell era, that he will quite happily turn up in any genre, any story, any setting.
That's good Parasite.
Yeah, positive. You know, it's you know, in the best possible way. But then
that's good tapeworm.
Friendly bacteria, isn't it? You know, and then so, you know, that's the Hartnell era. Other eras sort of occupy something that they're ripping off. So the Pertwee era is sort of lightly James Bond. You've got the gothic horror of the Hinchcliffe era. You know, your sort of kitchen sink drama of the RTD era. I mean, even like Moffat continually rewriting The Time Traveller's Wife or something. It's like they're very much, you know, what we can do is take the basics of Doctor Who and transplant it into something else. Whereas Saward very much gives the impression that he would be rather writing anything else other than Doctor Who.
Well, in this, he'd very definitely be writing...
He wants to be writing Minder, doesn't he? Or,
Minder for Euston Films, or anything that's a bit of a gritty crime thriller.
Yeah. He would love to be making cop shows.
Because, we've not really explained this.
Sweeney style.
This does start with Maurice Colburn as Lytton, who's a mercenary character from a previous story, with Brian Glover, who's I really like Brian Glover, and he's got a couple of other kind of bits of muscle, and they're
Brian Glover's the
ostensibly
closest they get to serious acting chops in this.
I don't know. I like Maurice Colburn as Lytton as well, to be fair. I think there's that sort of urbane... He, for me, was the one bright point in this, was Lytton.
They're going to pull off a diamond job, but actually they're not. It's Lytton leading them off to meet the Cybermen. But
why are the Cybermen in London? Why are they there?
It's one of those things when you've been given a shopping list of things to get into the story.
You've got to try and tick it off somewhere.
It's all over the bloody shop.
No, but I get that Lytton has been hired by the... What are they called? The
Cryons.
The Cryons.
The touchy-feely Cryons.
These creepy lesbian
We
cult.
need to get to them, yeah. They're terrible because are we jumping about a bit too
Well, I
much?
was going to say, just to sort of wrap up
Yeah.
that point, that it's like that he would, it's very much the sense that he wants to be writing the Sweeney, he wants to be writing Minder, he wants to be writing any of these other sort of slightly
Euston
more
films,
slightly
kind
more
of,
sort of
yeah.
intense dramas. What he doesn't want to be writing is in Doctor Who, and it's almost like. It's not just, I'm not quite sure what to do with this. There's almost a petulance to it. That he deliberately, I mean, the Doctor spends the entirety of the first half of the narrative just looking for an entry point to the story. He doesn't do anything.
Dreadful.
He just wanders around. And, Saward, I think, pulls this off successfully precisely once in his career, which would be Resurrection. Was it Revelation?
Revelation's the kind of Evil in War ripoff.
Yeah, Revelation of the Daleks, where he obviously wants to be telling, an Evil in War ripoff with mercenaries. Fine. And that's, I think, the one occasion where he pulls that off and renders it entertainingly. And the Doctor's got nothing to do with that either. He just sort of wanders around in the background, but sort of pulls that off. But here it's just like, I don't actually think there's a lot of holes in the plot here, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense. I don't think it is because the plot in and of itself is very complicated. I think it's because everything happens so glacially that you're barely aware of anything moving and therefore don't have any sense of what's going on.
And nothing adds up. And I gotta say, as a 13-year-old kid, when it was announced in Doctor Who Monthly, Matthew Robinson's coming back to direct this story, Attack of the Cybermen, I thought, oh, great. The new Doctor is against some classic enemies. I just wanted a very middle-of-the-road kind of solid story. And even at that age, admittedly 13's a bit of an awkward age when you're slightly embarrassed by your hobbies when you were younger and you're moving on to bigger and better things, hopefully. But, yeah, God, this was just horrible.
I think the other thing is that I don't think necessarily the continuity porn, as we keep calling it in this, is annoying. I don't think it is why this is bad. Whereas I've seen a lot of criticism of this story where it rests on like, well, the thing that it gets wrong is that it alienates the mainstream audience by making it a sequel to some stories no one would have seen. To be honest, it's like the motivation of the Cybermen, in as much as it's explained, and in as much as Mondas...
The motivation of the Cybermen.
In as much as these are set up, is, I think, fairly straightforward. The Cybermen's planet was destroyed in the year 1986, so they've travelled back to the year 1985 to try and prevent that. The problem with it is that rather than just saying, oh yeah, we've travelled back from the future to stop our planet being destroyed, they instead have a 10-minute scene where they stop and recap the plot of the 10th planet for the point of recapping the plot of the 10th planet.
No, but also,
Yeah.
Why,
Back in the room.
if they've gone back in time to 1985, they already have a fucking time machine. So why is their whole raison d'etre to steal a time machine?
Because they need two, apparently, for reasons. It's like,
Sure.
They've used the initial time machine to go back to 1985
Yeah.
behind the sewers, but they can't just sit still for 12 months and go, don't come to Earth.
Yeah.
Don't come to Earth.
It's just...
They need to go and get the Doctor's TARDIS and go back and say, don't go to... crash Halley's Comet into the Earth or something.
Yeah.
yeah, they need to destroy the Earth instead. It's
Yeah.
just like, none of this.
But
it's
that whole
it's
thing of the
problems.
continuity porn of less problem with now, because I seriously think viewers would have just thought, is this exciting?
No, they'd have turned
Yeah.
off. They'd have turned off
Is
not
this
because
fun?
they were
They're
saying
not gonna
this is
think,
referencing something I don't understand. They'll have
Yeah.
turned off because it's shit.
Because when I was watching it last night, I was watching Faith Brown as a Cryon in a big sort of Perspex mask going, oh, the Cybermen want to stop Mondas being destroyed.
I hate the
She
Cryons.
doesn't know what she's talking about. But I don't really care. It gets across some sort of, there's something happening. And the idea with her character is more, she's going to sacrifice herself. The Cryons, let's get on to the Cryons.
Well,
They're awful. They look terrible as
All right,
well.
Doctor
They
Who
look really
had
bad.
Doctor Who had budget restrictions, but it shouldn't really have. This sounds really birthday card greetings. It shouldn't have imagination restrictions.
I
it
honestly,
really is. Someone realizes we've only got like a couple of £100 to do these outfits.
I mean,
I swear
let's
to
not put
God,
any effort into
I
them.
swear to God, you'd be better off. This is where you need production nous and just some common sense.
Could have just had a little bit of makeup or something
It
to
could-
look
it
a little
lit-
icy.
it
They could be ice
liter-
people.
It literally could have been.
They
Well,
look like the
especially
fish
when you've
people
got-
from the Underwater
Like
Minute.
literally, if they just, for example, had a red line from their forehead down to their chin. That would be better than...
You could have done it on the Deep Space Nine model of like a little bit of speckling down the side or something. Couldn't you?
Just anything that would, rather than having a character that doesn't have any facial expression when you've already got the Cybermen.
Yeah.
But not even just a character, but a guest artist. You've got Faith Brown or Sarah Greene, who at least were relevant at the time.
Yeah.
And you've hidden them under a big chunk of perspex. So really, I can only tell them by
could have been anyone.
Their eyes.
You're absolutely right. Why on earth would you bother getting some people, they're not like Oscar-winning stars, but you've got names. You've got a couple of names. The point
it was
of
originally
getting
meant to be
names
Koo Stark as well, wasn't it? It was meant to be playing one of the Krans.
It's just unbelievable.
Which, to be fair, would have been even more...
We got Sarah Berger instead.
There's nothing heroic about the Doctor either. So basically, the lead Cryon says... Well, I don't know. I'm gonna take this sonic lance. I presume she takes the sonic lance, stuffs it up her arse until it's hot enough.
I'm touching John's shoulders as he says this as well,
and plonks it in the. By the way, they're of course locked in a cell room with tons of highly volatile explosive, which comes in pretty handy. I mean, just.
Well, you can't expect the Cybermen to shift that,
and
can you?
And then the Doctor is locked up with her. He doesn't even try to save her. He doesn't even game out how... because there are times when, for example, the Tenth Doctor says, but maybe I could do this, or maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do this. And they say, no, Doctor, I'm sorry, you can't save me, but try and save everyone else. And then there's heroic death or something. She says, no, I'm going to probably just blow myself up to try and stop them. And he goes, all right, see ya. It's just unbelievable. He makes no effort. He's completely unlikable. He's ghastly to Perry. The most reassuring he can be is, "I won't hurt you, kittens."
Problems.
And then and then goes around, wanders around London for a bit.
Well, that's the thing, because he's given so, and this is possibly what makes what you've just described even worse, because he's got so little to do in the story. I mean, literally, this thing just happens without him. But they nevertheless have to have some Doctor scenes. It's literally just us hanging out with this arsehole.
Yeah.
Which is just awful, because it's like not even that like you sort of see him trying to solve mysteries or anything like that. You're just spending time with this absolute dick.
Yeah.
And his annoying friend.
In a story that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And like you say, actually, it's a really simple plot. Mondas got destroyed.
It's deceptively simple. They make it look a lot more complicated than it is.
There's just a whole load of... And how do the Cybermen get into the TARDIS in the first place? I don't care. I don't care.
Well, we were 45 minutes into the story. Something's got to happen.
Yeah. And it's just...
I'm scraping for something positive to say about this.
The sewer's the right place to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that the sewer scenes are more atmospheric than I perhaps would have expected from 80s Doctor Who, simply because they're not lit up really brightly and look really obviously like a studio set. And I would say in general, some of the direction is... I mean, I think of all the people who have a creative stake in this, Matthew Robinson's working the hardest, I think. I'm not saying it's great direction, but there's an attempts at least to do something that looks moderately dynamic with how he shoots it.
Oh, but no, I'm sorry. No, I won't have this. If I won't have this. That final shootout between the where the cyber controller gets caught in the crossfire and the Doctor's on the ground and he's sort of shooting left, right, and centre. That looks terrible.
That's the Doctor we want, though. All these years we've wanted a Doctor who just rolls around with a gun shooting people.
But that's the thing. He solves the situation by getting a big gun and shooting up a load of Cybermen.
He stabs one of them in the chest.
Yeah, I mean, fuck the rescue. This is what Hartnell should have been doing all the time.
Both him and Perry have a gun in their pocket at various points until it's taken off them by Terry Malloy.
I don't want to go all White House on anybody's ass.
He goes down there and says, like, what happened to the other policeman? Oh, he's having a bit of a lie down, says the Doctor. Like, what?
As if he's broken his neck or something.
Just kicked the shit out of him or something.
Yeah, the Doctor's very handy in this.
All the bit where the Doctor tells Perry to shoot the Terry Malloy character as well.
Michael Kilgareth is back as a cyber controller.
We've got Michael Kilgareth and David Banks, lest we forget. I mean, this is real. The Cybermen are camp as tits in this. They squabble.
Excellent.
They squabble. I also like the fact that everyone. I mean, I don't like it as a creative decision, but I like the fact that everyone playing a Cyberman has a slightly different read on it. So they've all got slightly different voices and slightly different walks. So a couple of them are doing like sort of proper robot walking, whilst others are just sort of hanging out like macho men.
I love the fact as well that, you know, right at the end where Lytton is sort of
Fiberized,
and you know, the Doctor goes and holds his hand.
Says I've misjudged you.
Yeah, and that's fine.
Oh, you'll take money from other people as well.
Even that doesn't make sense, because last time it's like, I think the Doctor's right to misjudge him, because last time he was an agent of the Daleks. And
this time he's taking money from the Cryons. So it's just the highest bidder, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a gun for hire. I mean, I know the idea is that he's changed, or he's turned a little. He's now, you know, a rogue who's working for the good, who will choose to work for the good guys. I don't mind.
The Doctor beats himself up about being so
but
suspicious.
Neither the writers, nor the performers, nor the director has managed to pull that off or make it emotionally convincing.
They're not conveying that.
No.
Morris Colburn, a better actor than this story deserves.
To be honest, Lytton is the one thing, just because in terms of. Just, you know, obviously a silly two-dimensional character given a vaguely urbane performance.
He's a little wry, at least.
Yes. No, I quite like the performance, and there's probably nothing to write about the character. I mean, that's the one thing that I would say vaguely works for me. I mean, that's the thing. We spend so much time with Lytton because, obviously, Eric Saward would rather be writing the Lytton adventures than he would Doctor Who.
Would you have rather have seen Blind Glover as the Sixth Doctor than Colin Baker?
To be honest, it's
no, think about it. That could have been the proto-Eccleston.
Well, no, that's the thing. If they're going to do the Doctor as a hard nut as well, it's like Colin Baker, who is, you know, like as we've discussed in the past, very much a stage actor in terms of play it big, so it bounces to the back of the room, but also in the facial expressions. There isn't there's a lot of kind of, you know, moves his head around a lot, you know, to really kind of, so that the people in the cheap seats can see what's going on. Yeah, to be fair, if Brian Glover had played the Sixth Doctor and they'd given him exactly the same script and he'd been beating people up and so
different outfit, hopefully. Yeah.
But you were talking about Morris Colburn. I mean, just the laziness of the writer and the casting decision. I mean, I haven't seen it and I don't know much about it, but, you know, from 76 to 78 there was a series called Gangsters. Who was the lead?
Morris Colburn. Yeah.
So
we've got a character. We needed someone to play a gangster. Who should we get? Why don't we get the lead from Gangsters?
We got this mercenary who was in a series about gangsters, and I would like to write a gangster thing. So I'm going basically we'll just do the whole gangster. I mean, they go and look at the bank, they case the joint, they work out the bloody tunnel systems, and then it's like, oh yeah, I suppose it has to be Doctor Who. So while they're down there, while you're down there, let's meet some Cybermen.
That's what Vicky, my wife, said actually, because Vicky heroically did not leave the room while this was playing last night.
Listener, he married that girl.
Listener, exactly. She's a keeper. She did sort of observe, which I think is correct and apt, that in the bits where you're cutting between the Doctor and Perry bickering in the TARDIS to Lytton and crew casing
got some important repairs to do.
Yeah, he's got some very important repairs to do. She said this just feels like two different programs that have been cut into each other, and even down to the fact that the location stuff, as we said last month, the location stuff shot on film, the TARDIS stuff shot on video. I mean, it literally feels like two different shows that have just been cut and shut next to each other without the slightest sense of how they'll
this is something
integrate.
to mention, because Saward is very positive about the 45-minute format, which was only for this series. Obviously, it's now one of the
we know that 45-minute Doctor Who can work.
It can, but he does nothing with this. He just has them hanging around for a long time before they get involved in the story.
Well, because his point is that the 25-minute format means that... Because his point is that once you've established the environment for the episode, you've got barely any time to do anything before you have to reach a dramatic crescendo to hit the cliffhanger. Which... fine, I sort of buy in principle, but simply what he wants to do is spend more time not building to any dramatic crescendo. Like, his solution is, great, 45 minutes, we can take out any sense of crescendo, which means it's shapeless. It's
Well, no,
completely
hang on. You say it's shapeless, and they have trouble building that environment, and that was something Saward wanted to do. Now, I think this isn't so much Saward, presumably, as John Nathan Turner and the director, and but a team decision. But one of the ways that I really think they have successfully created an atmosphere is with Malcolm Clarke's fabulous music.
Well, I wonder where you were going with that.
I was going to get onto this because I know you're a fan.
Absolutely astonishing.
Oh, it's
I cannot actually believe.
Brings me out in hives.
Like, honestly, they could have gone and, like, if that had, even if it was going to air, I'd have had someone live playing the piano or anything other than this. It is. I cannot.
It's ghastly, isn't it?
Make sure you splice some of it into the show.
Oh my god! What we do at the end of every
But it's
yes.
just like, for example,
should we just? Was that a surprise to you, John?
For example, when Lytton says,
John's brandishing his piece of paper.
Yeah, he is.
Lytton says,
the giraffe-headed stationery.
When Lytton says that they are gonna go to attack the bank via the sewers, there's literally a farting squelch in the music.
That's exactly what Vicky said watching it. She said that's the farty sewer music.
It's just unreal.
But then the bit where obviously
it kills any dramatic.
When the TARDIS turns into the organ and arrives, and the Doctor plays the start of Toccata and Fugue, and then simply the score just takes over and just carries on playing it, not just as a little echo at that moment. So he doesn't just go do-do-do or something like that. It carries on playing for the rest of the scene. It's just...
And indeed later when he finds out who's an agent of the Time Lords. Yes,
oh man,
Well, no, I was going to ask you about this.
On that.
I was going to ask you about this because one of the first times Matt and myself came across each other was when you wrote a letter to my previous podcast.
Yeah, Midnight Video.
And you were very positive about Malcolm Clarke.
Well, I'm very positive about Malcolm Clarke's contribution to the Sea Devils because that, is a story that, is certainly a good deal better than this, although flawed.
It's a good soundtrack.
But also the soundtrack is... it's sort of so atonal. Like, I don't know if anyone here is sort of... I doubt any of our listeners are particularly interested in the ins and outs of synth technology.
Neither of them.
But neither of them. But on this score, it's obviously made on a Yamaha DX7, which is like one of the early digital synths, and he basically plays through a number of the stock patches. Whereas, I mean, I know a lot of people really dislike the score to the Sea Devils because it is tuneless and very, very intrusive. But I think it really does conjure an atmosphere and is really strange.
I love it,
and is really hard to make. It's someone battling with the technology. Whereas here he's got a cheap digital synth and he just bashes this out in sort of almost
he's doing
one
kind
take.
of riffs on Z-Cars and Steptoe and things.
Well, it's that idea that it would be quite funny to echo other music that you might know. Yeah, so when we see Totter's Lane, which, to be honest, if even one of the better 80s composers like Peter Howell was doing it, when you see the sign saying, I am Foreman, you'd have maybe had a pick up a little bit of the theme tune or something.
How does it go again?
Whereas Malcolm Clarke plays fucking Steptoe and Son over it. It's like, well, that's not even what the reference is. That's not even why this is here.
If an incontinence panted OAP... part-time Wurlitzer player at one of Britain's more low-rent seaside resorts, also dabbled in electronic music. That's what this sounds like.
Yeah, it's awful. It sounds like
it's end of the pier.
It's terrible.
Ghastly. It's really terrible.
Right. Well, look, we have just literally just vented and got quite angry for half an hour. So I don't know if the listeners is going to make any sense. Let's just...
Anything to say about Nicola Bryant's performance?
Well, I love
costume. Her succession of two
oh my God.
Well, I do
costumes.
have something to say about that. I love the fact she starts off for obvious reasons, she starts off in this kind of spangly leotard and shorts thing. But the Cybermen seem to take her off to change her into a red leotard with a blue belt.
Yeah.
Because they're going to a cold planet. And I love that fashion sense rather than just giving her a big coat.
But it's also the way she comes back into the room with the Cyberman, as if the Cyberman's gone in and picked the outfit out for her.
No, it doesn't look good on you. That doesn't really,
Well, they are pretty camp, the Cybermen. You can sort of imagine that they're gonna...
Well, let's finish on that. How do we find the Cybermen? The last time we reviewed a Cyberman story was Tomb, and we kind of agreed they were poor monsters.
Yeah.
Any change here?
Well, no, I mean, they're appalling in this, but they're really funny. I mean, there's bits of Cyberman business in here that make me laugh. Just because, the really fat, paunchy cyber controller, camp OTT performances from everyone who has to do a Cyberman voice. I mean,
we haven't even mentioned the slave subplot.
Oh yeah, two men screaming at each other in a quarry.
God,
What's that meant to be? A bit of Waiting
Bates
for Godot?
and
Is
Stratton.
that meant to be a bit of Beckettian nonsense?
Yeah, we're going all through that, and then they just die.
Yeah.
Along with Brian Lover, they just get shot, don't they?
Yeah, that's just filling in 20 minutes of screen time, isn't it?
Sorry, I know we're back. You were asking about the Cybermen, but I was thinking about the action on Telos, and that was there. No, I mean they're very camp. They're funny for all the wrong reasons. I guess you could say the costume still looks good. No. Fuck it. It looks terrible.
It looks awful. It sounded like I was sort of trying to get off doing a redemptive reading of this, but the fact is, I was expecting another twin dilemma. And this is not another twin dilemma, but I think the twin dilemma, the twin dilemma is a very, very special case in terms of just how everything comes together to make that so perfectly unwatchable. But really, this is appalling.
Okay, right, Lee Anderson on the line. Hello, Lee.
Hello?
Hello, you're through to the Doctor Who team.
Can I speak to Collins, please?
Hello, I'm here, Lee.
Is it true that you're going to have a robot cat?
Is it true I'm going to have a robot cat? Not as far as I know. No, I don't think that's true at all. It was a distortion of the fact that I wear a cat badge on my lapel. But there isn't going to be a robot cat that I know about.
Right, thank you.
Sorry
Can I have your
about that.
autograph, please?
You can indeed.
Right.
Bye.
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 Well, there you go. Thank you very much for listening. What do you think one day we'll do a show where we really like all three stories?
No, I've tried to distribute them evenly. So
fair enough. Anyway, we'll be back in April with another three stories.
That sounds a bit.
Sounds like
it may only be March, and yet I feel we've already had ourselves crossed off Eric Saward's Christmas card list.
Ian Levine's writing those cards, though.
Well, on that bombshell, it's good night from me, John West.
Night from me, Matt Needer.
And Jim Hall. Bye bye.
Okay, thanks for your call.
Oh, can I have Colin's autograph, please?
Right, yes, you can.
Just got a
And
hand.
Colin, could you say hello to my mum, please?
Hello, his mum.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.
And she said she's glad you got your hair cut.
Oh,
really?
Well, that, eh?
When didn't she like it?
Since you started.
Oh.